What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
And my name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive, number 201 for the episodes.
There we go. There we go.
Going for our next 100.
Yeah, that's right. Sometime in 2028, 2027?
Something like that.
2028.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll still be looking fresh, looking better than we do now.
Yeah. Hopefully.
So pause this track and look at us in 100 episodes and
see how it's changed.
See how it's going. But anyway, we are here talking about Jeremiah still. This is our third week in this series, right?
Yeah.
Third week?
Yeah, right in the middle. Well, almost in the middle.
And we had an awesome graduation Sunday last Sunday.
It was a great time in worship. It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can talk about that.
We'll talk about that when we get into it. But Dave, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm good.
Glad to hear that.
And you're doing good?
Always good.
All right.
Always good.
Okay.
Well, let's jump into it, shall we? So, yeah, like we said, kind of at the very tip top, we had a great graduation Sunday. It was good to celebrate some seniors for high school and college.
I have been doing this a long time. And, it wasn't a huge graduating class, but those kids that were graduating, they're all special. They've all contributed so much to the church in the time that they've been here. I've been here 5 years now, so I've watched them grow up since, I guess, 8th graders.
Yeah.
And it was just a beautiful service. Your words were just so from the heart because I knew you know them all well. So, it was great. And shout out to Ian and Bryce for singing with the choir.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. Both have beautiful voices. It was awesome.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool and such a special addition to a senior. I'm not sure I've been. I guess I've been at somewhere. It's like you have kind of like your seniors do a little something in service and stuff like that. But singing with the choir alongside them and
doing the solos,
that was really cool.
It was nice.
So
it was nice.
Well, Dave, you spent a good time talking about Jeremiah and really this idea of what was the theory or the Benning effect or
Dunning-Kruger
effect.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Yeah. So, first of all, let me say, Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, any of the prophets, when you do a series on them, they're convicting, they're hard hitting. And I wondered particularly last week how it was going to be received, because if I'm being faithful to the text, it's going to be hard to hear some of it. Mm-hmm. And so, but generally, I've gotten really good comments that people were enjoying the series and learning about Jeremiah, even though some of the words are a little harsh and hard to hear. But I started off with the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that term, Dunning-Kruger effect, you have run into it because it's people that you run across that are super confident with what they believe, and also oftentimes wrong.
Yeah.
But you can't argue with it.
Those types that will argue to a wall about their point, even if it's 100% not right.
Yeah, I think words that like the definition would talk about it, this cognitive bias that we have, and we all have it.
Sure,
we all
happens time
do
to time.
it. But now we're living in a day and age where there's conspiracy theories and rabbit holes that you can go down to where people get involved in. And they listen to podcast series and things like that, which are chasing that. And there's no talking to them. It's just,
Real quick before we get into the depths of it, you said conspiracy theory. Dave, do you have a favorite conspiracy theory?
A favorite one?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or one that you're like,
I'd have to think about that for a second. There's so many. Do you have one?
I don't really have one, but actually for Rachel's birthday, she asked us to prepare a quick presentation on a conspiracy theory, and the one I did was actually about Disney. Some people believe that because he was very innovative and, you got Tomorrowland and all that stuff, a part of Disney, that he actually is cryogenically frozen.
Right, I've heard that.
And people were searching that up so frantically that that's actually why they created the movie Frozen, so that when you type in Disney and Frozen, now all his stuff would be buried.
Okay. So what he might,
He may or may not be. Nobody really knows, but
well, I mean, there are conspiracy theories that have turned out to be true.
that's right.
And that's right.
Who knows?
Things that we've laughed in, it was going like, well, who's laughing now? So, I don't know. But it's when we have this strong belief about something, and when it carries over into our church life and our spiritual terms, where people are set and they feel like they have all the knowledge and there's no room for doubt or there's no room for questioning, is where we, I think, can get into maybe the state that Jeremiah is walking in talking to it, because the people definitely had a cognitive bias about the role that they thought that religion was playing in their life. But I did want to say, I did do a little preparation for this, because I have referred to several times, I think both in preaching and in this podcast, I know I've mentioned this before. One of the favorite little books that I've read in recent years is called The Sin of Certainty by Pete Eanes. And in it, and so I got like a one-sentence definition that he would say about the sin of certainty is the tendency to confuse our interpretations, beliefs, or theological systems with absolute, unquestionable truth, leaving little room for humility, mystery, growth, or the possibility that we might be wrong, And so, example with that is, we all grew up with certain beliefs that we were taught in the churches that we believe in, and some of those don't leave any room for anyone that might have a different interpretation. So certain denominations or certain people that might have beliefs that are different than ours. One example might be baptism. People grow up with certain practices that they believed about baptism. And so this is the way that we believe, and everyone else is wrong. It's not that maybe we could it could be a both and.
Yeah.
That we can see the value in both ways. Another example might be people that come from a real strong Wesleyan tradition like I do, or somebody that came from a real strong Calvinist position. And, that I can see the value in both. I can look and see the biblical reasons why someone might be a Calvinist and have an appreciation for that, but it's not the way that I practice. And so that's a little bit of what I'm talking about, but as we get into Jeremiah and what he is running up against, is that people were hiding behind the temple in the text. And just a little lead up to it, we skipped a few chapters. We were in 1 and 2 as he begins his ministry, his prophesying. And so it leads up to chapter 7, which is a critical chapter. And some people have referred to this as the temple sermon. And so he goes and God tells him to go and stand outside the temple and deliver this message. And it's a hard-hitting message, as we read about on Sunday. But basically, he is calling them out for hiding behind the temple. They have gone there thinking that, and what he is prophesying about is that he's not out there calling God out for being mad at them for, just for the sake of being mad. He's trying to warn them that if they don't change their ways, they are headed down a path that is what is going to eventually lead to the Babylonians coming in and taking over, and the whole Babylonian exile, which is a big, huge chapter in the Jewish tradition in the Old Testament. And that's happening. It's already happening. They watched it in the north. Mm-hmm. They watched it because this is the divided kingdom, and they're in the south around Jerusalem. But in the north, those people have already been taken over and brought into exile by the Assyrians. But they still don't get it. They still don't listen. And the people, what they were doing up there is exactly what they're doing down there. They're worshiping other gods. They are not following, their worship is just what they do inside the temple. It is not they're not putting those words or those things that they're doing in the temple into action outside of that. And the reason is they thought because they had the temple, because the temple was there in their community, that God was never going to let anything happen to them. They go to temple, they bring their sacrifices, but those sacrifices had very little to do with their public life outside of the temple. So,
Yeah, I feel like that overview is a really it's a good one for the text, but it's still funny to me that if you were probably to ask many people today still who maybe have a problem with Christianity or religion or whatever, they would say a lot of these similar things. Is like there's this hypocrisy of like what's being taught inside and what's being acted upon on the outside. You know what I mean?
yeah, and I used one example, which might have been harsh, but I do know that it's true to some extent. Maybe I over-exaggerated. I had a little pushback. It was actually from my daughter about this, and that is wait staff at restaurants. And I guarantee you, if you go and interview wait staff at interviews about the after-church crowd, you'll probably hear that there's some fine people that come and they're great tippers and they're very pleasant. But you're also going to hear the stories of people that are extremely rude, that are terrible tippers, that come and they take over a table for, a couple of hours so they can't have another service come in. And, I've had both from my example of what I've witnessed, examples of that I've heard from people in my churches that worked on wait staff, and also from my son who owns a restaurant. That church people and how the people can sing "Amazing Grace" and "I Surrender All" at 11 o'clock, and then lose their freaking minds because the sweet tea is not refill doesn't come the way they want it to. And so that's an example of what we're doing inside church ought to be transitioning, and that's just maybe one tacky example. There's so many ways, and you're right on that people will say that sometimes what we profess to be and to do as followers of Jesus is not matching up with how we're living our lives outside of there, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely the case. And who was it? Was it Gandhi? Somebody's got a quote that's like, I love the Jesus of the Christians, but I don't love the people, or something like that.
Right,
like,
yeah.
It's the people who mess it
And
up, or something like that.
You're already doing the work of where we need to go with this, because it matched what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
But there really are some modern days application of how we need to take these words to heart.
Yeah.
But one section he gets into what they were doing, professing within inside the temple, and they were going out and said, you're not taking care of the poor, and the marginalized, the widows, those kinds of things that show up in the Old Testament law. You are in your dealings with other people in business, you're doing right. And he goes so far as to say, you have turned, my temple into a den of robbers, which I think is a great phrase, because a den of robbers, what is a den of robbers? And I pointed
hideout,
out,
they're safe.
It's their hideout. It's not where the crime's taking place. It's where they go to hide. And so I think that's very right on point. When they were, and when we turn, worship into something, that is a hiding place, and not a place that is convicting us and inspiring us to go out and to do good and to live our lives the way that God's called us to do. Yeah. And so, and Jesus said that. Jesus quoting Jeremiah. Jesus, when he overturns the money changers' tables, he goes in, he sees what they're doing, and he turns them over, and he we credit it to Jesus, but he's actually quoting Jeremiah. Mm-hmm. He says, you have turned, my temple is to be a house of prayer, and you have turned it into a den of thieves or den of robbers. And so,
it's just interesting how this is a similar thing that just keeps popping up in humanity, and why we do that. Why is it that we keep putting church and religion and stuff like that, and making it kind of like a shield for us to look good, but not something we live on and live for. I'm not saying us particularly, but just kind of in general.
Yeah, and like them, they thought they were okay because they had the temple. They thought they were okay and nothing would ever happen to them because they were, quote unquote, religious in their mind.
Yeah.
That in their mind they were religious because they went to temple and they went through the perfunctory giving their sacrifices and hearing the liturgy or whatever, but it wasn't shaping their everyday life. And what it gets into in other chapters, they were also worshiping foreign gods.
Yeah.
They would worship the one true God, and then to sort of hedge their bets, they would go out and, worship other gods, fertility gods and gods of harvest, and there was gods for everything. They were doing that to sort of hedge their bets. And, God said, no, that breaks one of the 10, not to have any other gods before me. And so, that was what Jeremiah is calling them out for, and of course they don't like to be called out.
Yeah, you kind of talked about this in the text, and then you started to kind of like bring it home in the sermon with if this was our boxing match, these are like the little stomach punches of the, you can go to church every week and not live this Christian life. Like, it's not about the space you're coming to, it's about how that's impacting your life.
And I think the Dunning-Kruger effect in church terms is that, we think just because we can quote a lot of scripture that we're living a lot of scripture, and that's a huge disconnect with that.
Yeah.
It should be translating to what our actions look like. Yeah, and we all do it. I mean, to some extent, it's very easier to look and see how other people are doing, the rude people at restaurants or others, than to see how we are not living up and not matching up.
Yeah. So how do we kind of move forward in this with this idea that this is something that is kind of ingrained a little bit in us, but we want to kind of move forward in our faith with some confidence, but also with some humility. So how do we kind of let both of those things work together? Because it's like, I think there's times in our faith where we want to feel that we can be confident in our prayer life, in what God has done and does through us and stuff like that. But then also at the same time is understand that there's some things we just don't understand.
I think we have to approach it, and I think you hit some of the words you used just then, humility. I think that's a big one. I think we need to hold our faith, the gifts that God has given us with open hands. Mm-hmm. Now, each week we profess something that we believe to be true. Yeah. And that is the Apostles' Creed. And, we believe those to be true. But yet, if we were to zero down or focus down on that, there may be some specific things about those that we need to learn more about. Yeah. Just because we say them, are we actually living like we believe them? And I use the example of trying to play off my starting with the Dunning-Kruger effect is the Jesus effect. Yeah. And so I think sometimes it takes us kind of looking again at how we are defining things that as we leave them out. And what does transformation really mean? How is it transforming our lives daily? Not some years ago when we gave our lives to Christ, but how is it continuing to transform us as we walk forward as his followers? And so, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where, Christian life is lived out. We'll get into it this week as we get into another dark section of Jeremiah and having the space for lament. We are not very authentic with one another. We're not very open about saying that we are tired or burned out, or we're questioning this part of our faith. We're struggling with something because I think we've been taught or modeled that we never question, that we never admit our vulnerabilities. And Jeremiah just puts it out there.
Yeah.
We'll see that. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but so I think not to get ahead of ourselves. I think the part of the question that you just asked has to do with that.
Yeah.
With just allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in our questions and our doubts, in the times where we have tried so hard and we have worked so hard, and yet we are burned out and we don't know what to do, and we're frustrated because it's not going the way that we had hoped it had. Mm-hmm. And believed and prayed that it would. And so where is God in that? And, we can even confess that we're upset with God in the moment. And so, and we're afraid to do that or admit that we do that because we're afraid of how people will perceive us, what our appearances might look like. But I think also just that somehow or another, that's not practicing faith.
Yeah.
And, as we will see, I think this week in Jeremiah, it actually can lead to deeper faith. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. The nice thing about these like book studies is like there's so many like points, but we're also kind of going along this journey of this story of Jeremiah. You know what I mean? Like we kind of start off with some highs, and then we're kind of getting some gut punches and stuff here, and there's kind of an end to this as well.
And I think also with Jeremiah, the way that we have defined success. Mm-hmm. I mean, the people do not just not a spoiler alert. I mean, it is a spoiler alert, but I'm assuming people know it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
It doesn't end well. They don't repent.
Yeah.
They go into captivity by the Babylons. I mean, those things are going to happen. And so if you were in today's terms saying, was Jeremiah successful? Yeah, we might say, well, no, he didn't succeed. But, he was successful because he was being faithful to God and what God had called him to do for that moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes hard in our modern world to reconcile. And so that's where we have to wrestle with it and work with it, of what faithfulness truly looks like for us.
Yeah. And how we can still be faithful even if things might not feel successful all around us, in our eyes.
And we do it so much in churches because it's all about numbers, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes faithfulness doesn't translate in the way that maybe our modern world would say success looks like. Mm-hmm. Being faithfulness of making disciples for Jesus Christ, of transforming lives. We feel like it looks like a full church and full offering plates, and sometimes it's not that.
Yeah.
And that's hard for us because that's just the way we've been conditioned to believe, and maybe that's one of those sin of certainties that we have. I mean, hey, the church is full and offering plates are full, so God must be blessing this. Well, maybe not. I mean, there's a lot of churches, and not calling anybody out, there's a lot of churches that their message, at least what they're portraying on social media and stuff, is, I think, antithetical to the message of Jesus. So, what does faithfulness look like?
Yeah.
I mean, for Jesus, it was a cross. There was a resurrection, but, that doesn't mean that they're hard things to go through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, as we kind of have hit this train stop in this story of Jeremiah, we thank you guys for riding with us this far, and we continue on. We got 3 or 4 more weeks of this. Yeah. I think you said it was a 7-week, right?
Yeah.
So 4 more weeks of this story and diving in, and I love it. I appreciate it. I think it's fun to kind of hear the more in-depth stuff as opposed to just hitting topics here and there, like to really kind of dive into these stories and follow along with how the people are thinking around Jeremiah and what he's kind of battling and working through, and kind of like seeing it as the full story and studying it as the full story helps me kind of understand, like, when I'm living in certain parts of my life, understand that it's part of a story, a part of a whole. You know what I mean? Yeah,
and I would end on this. Brueggemann, one of the things that I brought out that he does, Walter Brueggemann is one of the key resources that I'm using. He has a commentary on Jeremiah, but he also has a book called Preaching Jeremiah, and he really does in depth of all the scriptures there, and he talks about that, like these times of convicting people and calling people in conviction, it's actually merciful. Mm-hmm. He's trying to save them.
Yeah.
And it may sound negative and harsh, and he's not doing it because he's angry at them. He's doing it because he loves them. I mean, he is angry, righteous angry with them because they're not doing the right thing. And so in a way, I know they can be hard-hitting messages, and some of the things I'm trying to be faithful to the text that can come out of it sound harsh and convicting, but it's merciful because God is calling us to a better way, a way that will lead to life and fullness, and so, with that sometimes means we have to correct our ways. And so, anyway, I liked what Brueggemann said about it being merciful.
Yeah.
And I think if we can see it, God's mercy in that, I think we've come a long way
Absolutely.
towards capturing the message of Jeremiah.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you for that, Dave, and thank you for watching. You want to add to the conversation, go on Facebook, YouTube, drop in the comments section below. You know how we do it here. And without any further ado, we hope you guys have a good week, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, and I know that there are a lot of folks that are planning on traveling for Memorial Day, so I hope you have safe travels where you are. We will have church, though, and so if you're in town, be here. But if you're not in town,
Join us online.
Join us online. That's why we have it. So we do. Our production team does a great job, and so we'd love to have you in worship, whether it's in person or online this week. All right.
All right, guys, y'all take care. We'll catch you next time.
God bless.